Okay, so we have been discussing family finances from a biblical perspective. And so far, there have been three things that we have learned. We started out and we learned just the fact that it's important to have a plan. God is not against plans, He's for planning. Some have mistakenly said, oh, if you plan, then you're taking God out of it and that's not faith. No, that's wrong. You plan with God involved in your plan, and that's faith. That, I trust you, Lord, that you're leading me in this plan. And you also plan with some flexibility, because if I get into this a ways and sense that God's telling me, okay, that was a good plan, but it'd be better if we did this, I want to adjust and be ready. So have a plan. The second thing that we learned was that we are stewards. We're not owners, we're stewards. And stewardship means we're taking care of something that belongs to someone else. And in this case, what belongs to someone else is our money. So even our money is a little bit of a misnomer, because it's actually God's money. And God has given it to us to take care of our family. He's given it to us to even enjoy things and have certain things that we enjoy. But He's given it to us predominantly to honor His kingdom and His kingdom work. And so that's what we need to understand as our stewardship. So it's okay to have a plan. We need to be good stewards. And then last time we talked about this, different categories of spending. And we said, okay, we have our needs. And that category of spending is going to be and should be the biggest budget item we have. These are things that we need. We need shelter, we need clothing, we need the ability to get back and forth to work. Okay, these are our needs, and that's our first and probably biggest category in spending. But we also have our wants. Sometimes I just want something, and it's not wrong to want something if I can get it by staying within scriptural financial practices. The problem I get into is when these wants, I just decide I'm going to get it any way I can. Doesn't really matter what God says, doesn't really matter, what I got to do to get it, I'm going to get it. And there was even a third category that we called desires. And the thing about desires is they're even beyond wants. This is kind of like the dream thing. This is kind of like if I could have the best of the best and just really have exactly what I wanted, and that's okay too. Nothing wrong with desires. We can have those things, but we have to keep in mind that as we think about our desires and even our wants, this is coming out of surplus money. This is not coming out of our regular money. We get to the point where all the bills are covered and we're regularly doing good with our budget, and we get to where we can start setting some money aside. Okay, now I'm able to collect some money to get some of these wants or some of these desires, or save or invest, and we'll talk about all those things before we're done with this process. So having that framework, we're kind of ready to start talking about a budget. Now, I told you the other day that doing a budget's work. This is not an easy thing. You're not going to find this to be just like, oh, snafu, I wish I'd written this down before. Boom, I wrote it all down and it's fine. In fact, what's more than likely going to happen when you start writing this down and trying to follow it is you're going to get into a situation where, well, that didn't work. Now what do I do? You're going to have to adjust it. It's going to be a little bit fluid at first until a few months. It'll take a few months to kind of get in the flow of that and then really get going. And so if I'm going to budget, there's two categories that I need to take out right off the top before I even think about how do I split all this up and spend it. There's two categories. We talked about them last week. God's money and the government's money. Those two things I just got to take off the top. Here's how much I make. I make $5,000 a month. 500 of it is a baseline on what I should give to the Lord. And then I know there's going to be taxes, and I've done enough of that to kind of know what my taxes are going to be. So here's my taxes. And I got to take those two numbers first of all and get them out of the way. And then once I get those out of the way, what's left is called my net spendable income. Okay? God's money's set aside, the government's money's set aside. Now, here's what I've got to spend. and I got to figure out how to get it into these categories and make sure it goes to the right place. Remember, on your giving your taxes to the government, that you may be in a situation where your employer takes it out, and if that's the case, you really don't have to think about it that much. It's already, once you get your check, that money's already gone, so you don't really have to think about it. But if you're self-employed, you definitely got to think about it. Either on your own or with the help of a tax professional, you got to figure out, here's what I got to set aside quarterly. That means this is what will be coming out monthly, and you got to figure that out so that you're paying in and getting that all taken care of as a self-employed person. The only thing I would say to you is if the money's already automatically coming out of your check, is make sure you write down the correct number on that W-4. If you have no idea what number's on your W-4, then go to your HR department at work and ask them, can I see my W-4? I might want to change it. And what your W-4 should say is the exact right number of dependents. So you've got you and your spouse, and there's 4 children. That's 6. That's what should be on your W-4. It's just you alone. There should be a 1 there. But what has become so popular is claiming 0 or claiming a lot less than there really is. And why it's become so popular, even to the point that some people who are running the HR department will say, oh, you should claim 1 or you should claim 0 even though you got 5. Because you'll get a big tax check. Hoorah! Woo! I'll get a big tax check. And then we'll go blow it on stuff that doesn't even matter. Because if I don't have enough discipline to save it during the year, then I don't have enough discipline to do the right stuff with it when I get it at the end of the year either. And so, I said this last time, but I'm going to say it again. Basically what's going on there is I'm letting the government use my money free all year long, instead of it being in my pocket or in my bank account. They're not giving me any interest. They're so happy to use my money interest-free. And then at the end of the year, yes, they'll give me back whatever I overpaid. Well, the goal should be to not overpay, okay? And so I want to use my money for my family and for myself all year long instead of the government using it. So that would be the one thing I would say. Make sure that your W-4 has the right number of dependents indicated on it so that you're not overpaying any taxes. Okay, I got that right. They're taking it out of my check. I don't even have to think about it. All right, well, that's not my case. I'm self-employed, but I got it figured out. And here's those 2 top tiers, God's money and my money. Now, that amount left, as I said, is your net spendable income, and that's the amount from which you meet your family's needs. And I'm just going to let that rest there. I'm kind of back. I'm finishing up the tail end of last week's lesson because of there was more material there than I realized, and it's taken me a little while to get through it. But now let's move on to this week's, which asks this question: where are we now? Okay, in order to get a budget together, in order to be able to have this plan in place, you're going to have to figure out where you're at right now, what's going on right now. And in order to start that budget and figure this out, the funny thing is that many people really have no idea where they're at. Really and honestly. If you start asking them detailed questions about where their money's going, a lot of people really don't know. And the only way that you can really know is to start tracking your spending. That's the only way to know. So you gotta, in order for this budget to work, because I'm going to give you next week some pieces of paper, and I'm going to tell you websites and stuff you can go to get, the forms you need or the apps you need to do this. But if you start plugging in those numbers, okay, here's our house payment, and here's our utilities, and here, you start plugging in those numbers, and you think, well, boy, howdy, looky there, we're in good shape. We're fine. But I didn't calculate the 5 trips to McDonald's every week and the going through Starbucks every morning. And, there might be a few $100s, in some people's cases, a few $100s a month of spending that's in this extra stuff that's not necessarily got a category on my budget lines. I'm going to have to make sure to categorize it and make sure that it's in my budget. And so track your spending. So literally, and here, it's so funny because these principles are not new. By the way, Dave Ramsey did not think of this stuff. He didn't think of this stuff. God thought of this stuff. And Dave Ramsey just tells people what God said, and a few other smart ideas that people that are economists and that have worked with money have known for a long, long time. And so, we've got some, I admire Ramsey. I think that you can go to RamseySolutions.com and get some really great tools. Also crown.org, and I'll repeat that again before we're over, and it's even in your notes. But the point I'm making is this is not new stuff. This has been the way money has worked forever. We haven't discovered some new amazing thing. This is the way money works. And if you want to be in a good position with money, these are the kind of things you have to do. If you just are like, I don't care, as long as, we're not out in the cold, I don't care. Well, I guess you can take that approach, but, there's some really great things you could get to and some really great things you could do if you would work on this and put a plan together. So the tracking of your spending is going to help you get to that point. Now, again, there are apps for that. There are apps you can put on your phone where every time you spend, you can plug the money in. But somehow, you've got to do it. And actually, the first step in this is to list out your debts. That's the first step in tracking your spending. You need to have this list, and I even gave you an example there in your notes of how to do it. So there are charts like this, there are apps like this where you write down, okay, who do I owe the money to? Okay, there's MasterCard, I owe this much money to. Wells Fargo Bank, I owe this much money to for my mortgage. We went and bought the kids clothes at Kohl's on a Kohl's card, and my car payment goes to so-and-so. And so you write down all the people that you owe, their contact information, because listen, this is an exercise in making sure you know, but it's also an exercise in we're going to climb this mountain and get it out of the way, is what this is. Then you put in that third column, you put in the payoff amount. Okay, if I were to pay off exactly what I owed, this would be the payoff amount. And that's a really great exercise because many people have no idea, because their brain only says, if I can afford the payment. It never says, what does this actually cost? And if you are in that situation, then knowing that payoff might be like, oh, God, I didn't realize, I've been paying on this for 3 years, I still owe that much on it? And so we need to know what the payoff amount is, how many payments are left, what is the amount I'm paying every month, what's the due date, and what's the interest. You need all of that somewhere where you can see it. And once you can see it, for some people it's going to be revelation. It's going to be like, my goodness, I had no idea. I didn't realize. People have credit cards that don't understand that they're paying, 20% interest on those credit cards. If they just take the time to really look at the piece of paper that's coming in the mail every month or the email that they're getting and actually look at that PDF file, it'd be like, wow, that's a lot of money that I'm paying in interest because I choose to use this piece of plastic everywhere I go. And so some people, it'll be a revelation. Many of these things might be a revelation. Some people, it'll just be like, huh, okay. Basically, that's not a whole lot of new information, but at least now I got it in an organized fashion. I can see it. And later on, we're going to talk about, how to go through a process of paying these off and getting them out of the way. But this is actually a very simple step to take, tracking your spending, but one that many people never do. Never do. It's been years since Missy and I did it. There's two sides of this thing. One is you're really struggling, so you need a budget to get to where you need to go. The other one is we're doing good, so we don't really think about it, but there's a caution there because maybe I'm bleeding money in places I don't need to be bleeding it, and if I was to pay attention to that, I could use that money better somewhere else. And so this is what this exercise is all about. And like I said, some people are going to be shocked. Just writing their debts out. They're going to be like, wow, Some people are going to be discouraged. That mountain's a big mountain, way bigger than I thought. I can't believe that, I made these decisions and this is where we're at. It could be discouraging, but listen, ignoring it will not fix it. It's not going to go away just because you decide it's too tough to think about. Ignoring it will not fix it. We've got to get this lined out and then begin to make plans and goals, because our goal, you list out those debts, our goal should be to eliminate every one of those lines. That should be our goal. Oh, Brother Scott, people are never going to be able to live without a car payment. Well, don't tell me that, because I've done it for years and years and years. I still can't afford to go buy a new car. There's no way I can afford to go buy a new car. But I can afford to go buy a car that will work. And before I could afford to go buy a car that would work, I could afford to buy a car that I had to work on. That's just the way it was. I can either decide that every once in a while I'm going to have to work on this thing, or I'm going to pay these payments. And I'm going to line somebody else's pocket with the interest money. Okay, that's the decision you have to make. And for some people, maybe, but see, creditors lie to us on purpose, because that's how they make their money, is by convincing us that borrowing this money is a smart thing to do. Man, go out and buy yourself a new car. It's much better to pay the payments than to have to take that thing to a mechanic. And then stuff like CarShield has got us all scared to death. We're going to have a $5,000 bill. We're going to have a $6,000 bill. Well, listen, I, at this point in my life, have owned lots and lots and lots of vehicles, and I have never had a $6,000 mechanic bill. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying I have never had a $6,000 mechanic bill. Is $1,000, $1,500 something that comes along every once in a while? Absolutely. But why does CarShield make money? Because a bunch of people send that money in, but very few people use it. That's the reason that they're making money. And so, I'm not mocking it and saying, that you shouldn't do that. If it gives you comfort, and you can afford it, then fine. But what I'm saying is that compared to making payments, even having to pay a mechanic a time or two a year is a very small amount compared to making payments. So we don't need to buy that hook, line, and sinker. We're trying to eliminate these lines. And then the big one would be the house, right? There's no way, Brother Scott, anybody, unless they really got some money, is going to end up owning their house. Everybody has to have a mortgage. That's still the line me and Missy and I have left. That's still our one line that we have left, is we have a mortgage. But man, we are trying hard I'm not satisfied just to make the payments until I die. I'm not satisfied with that. We're trying to get it paid off, trying to accelerate what we're doing. So that's going to be our goal, is to eliminate those lines and get to the point where we don't have to worry about listing out our debts, because there is no debts, And so the second thing in tracking our spending, not just listing out our debts, but truly tracking where every dollar goes. In fact, that's what Dave Ramsey's app is called, the Every Dollar app, and it's good. It's a good, effective tool. There's kind of two versions of it. There's the free version, which for most of us would be perfectly fine, and then there's one you can pay a little bit of money for, and it has more bells and whistles. But you can also do the same thing on a piece of paper. You can also do the same thing in an Excel sheet. You don't have to necessarily have an app, but they're pretty simple and pretty easy to use. But listen, on this tracking spending, both husband and wife, if it's a situation where it's a married couple, both husband and wife have to be dedicated to doing this, writing down your expenses throughout the day, or if it's something you use your credit card for, okay, you're going to have a record of that. You can go back, but be careful, because if you're just depending on, I'm looking at my credit card statement, you won't know what a bunch of that stuff is exactly for Like we went to Walmart and we used our credit card because that's the way we do it. We just use it for convenience. We don't use it for, to stay on that bill. Okay, so I got 3 times we went to Walmart on this month's bill, but what did I buy? Is this for groceries? Is this for, household items? So you're going to do it right. You're going to have take your receipts, and you're going to have to split that stuff up. You're going to have to pay a little bit of attention to getting this down, because the whole point is this, that if I'm overspending somewhere and I don't even realize it, I want to figure that out. And if I'm like, whoa, look at how much we're spending on bologna. Could we possibly make do with 3 pounds instead of 10? I mean, let's figure this out. Or anything like that, where you could be spending a lot more money than you realize in a certain area, Maybe we don't have to have ice cream every night. Maybe we can, cut down a little bit on this. And so, but both parties need to be doing it. And here's the thing. Don't change your habits just because you're tracking your spending. Well, I know the reason we're doing this is because in case there's any problematic areas, we're going to cut those out. So I'm not going to write down my Starbucks every morning. I'm just going to leave that off of there. No, don't do that. And don't change your habits. Like, we're going to do this for the next 3 months. Well, I better stop going through Starbucks because I know how my husband will feel about that. This will be an uproar, so I'm not going to write that down. That doesn't help anything. Unless it just clicked with you. Like, good grief, look at the money I'm spending going through Starbucks. Not only am I not going to write this down, I'm going to stop doing it. Okay? If that's what's going on, fine. No problem. But I just got to hide it while we're doing this? No, that's not fine. That's not okay. Every dollar needs to be accounted for. So I stop in at Circle K, get myself a Polar Pop. I got to write it down, $1.29. I took cash out of my pocket and paid for it, but somehow I got to record it. I spent $1.29 on that. I wrote a check for $15 so that the school could give my kid a band T-shirt. Got to make sure that's recorded. I whipped out my credit card and paid $50 for me and my buddy to go to Texas Roadhouse. All right, I gotta record it, and I gotta get it under the right categories, which is actually the third step. So we've listed our debts. We have tracked our spending. You're going to have to do that at least a couple of months, at least. And then we start breaking this stuff up into categories, okay? And there's a whole list of categories here. Income, tithe, taxes, housing, which would be your house payment and your utilities and all the stuff, maintenance that you do on the house, food, and I want to make sure you understand that by that one I mean groceries, stuff you buy at the grocery store, not eating out. If you combine your eating out and your grocery, then you're going to miss something that you need to see, okay? Because a lot of people eat out way more, especially in our culture, than maybe they even know or think about, okay? And it's still a lie that it's cheaper to eat out than it is to eat at home. That's a fib. That's not right. And so don't buy into that one, and figure out the difference, okay? I'm not saying stop eating out unless you know it's a problem and you're already ready to stop it, but be sure you separate those two things. There's another category down here that's entertainment, but in my tracking, so Missy and I started doing this. Okay, we don't have to do this. I don't have to know where all the dollars are going in terms of for us to survive. I don't have to do that. But when I started going through this, and it's been a while since I've done these exercises, I thought, hey, if I'm going to ask you to do it, then I'm going to do it. And who knows, God may show me some things like, wow, there's a place right there we could improve, we could do better in this area. So I started in January tracking all of our expenses, and I'm going to do it for the next couple of months. And so we're writing these things down. Well, in mine, I had a category for just eating out. Because in most people's lives, it's a pretty big thing, And once you get that number, once you're like, whoa, that's what we spend eating out, maybe you'll be like, we got to make a change, Or maybe you'll say, okay, that's not as bad as I thought it would be. We're, not too bad. And so, but the only way to know it is to track it and then get it into these categories. And so there's a lot of categories listed there. You might need to add some other categories. You might not need all these categories. Some of them may not pertain to your situation right now. But it's very important that we don't leave anything out, that if we're going to really achieve our goals, then we have to know where every dollar is going. And again, you can use whatever method you want to. Write it down on a piece of paper, do it on a computer program, use an app, and I'm going to repeat again, RamseySolutions.com, which is right there in your notes, or crown.org. Both of those, there's probably others. Maybe you know of one that you think would be better for you. But those, you can go there, and there's all kinds of free tools that you can use to go through this process. So check all the totals by tracking the cash that you've spent, by looking at your online register, or if you still use a checkbook register and write it out, record all those things. And if you do use a credit card, which I discourage the use of a credit card unless you can pay it when the bill comes. If you can pay it when the bill comes, then that's convenient. But other than that, I would be very careful about the use of credit cards. It's important for both husband and wife to be a part of the process, and here's what's going to happen. After you do this for 2 to 3 months, then you're going to set a time where you can both sit down and review it, or if it's, you by yourself, because you're not married or whatever, then where you're going to sit down and review this. And the thing about it, especially in the husband-wife situation, is make it a non-pressure thing, okay? Because if you track this spending and then you get together to talk about it, and the first thing that happens is, see there, I knew it. Look at this category is not me, this is you. And if you just stop doing this, okay, that's not helpful. That's not helpful. All right? This is designed to help both of us understand where the money's being spent and do we need to make any corrections. And we're going to mutually agree to make those changes. So it's not designed to make someone feel ashamed or like they've done something terrible. We just need to get together at a time we can give this our full attention, which sometimes when you got kids is hard, but figure out, okay, when can we sit down and we're really going to be able to concentrate on this. We might need to ask somebody at church, would they watch the kids so we could, get alone and do this, make sure it's got our full attention, and ask God to help us clearly see where our money really is going. Where our money really is going. I have some people that I jokingly, and maybe I shouldn't, maybe I'm doing a bad thing, but I have some people I jokingly call the 7-Eleven king or queen. Of course, around here, that doesn't make any sense. It'd be the Circle K king or queen. But, listen, some people can't go buy one without stopping. They definitely got to have a Polar Pop. And if you're in there for a Polar Pop, then maybe you should buy a candy bar. Maybe you should buy I know people personally that if they kept track of that, they'd be amazed at the amount of money they're spending in a gas station. So, but how do you figure that out? You track it. Because if you don't, you think, I don't spend that much. It's just this. I don't spend that much. Well, keep track of it and just see how much it really is. Maybe it is no big deal. Maybe it's fine. But then again, maybe it's not. And you and your wife or anybody that you're trying to work together on these finances, you both need to know. Now, tracking may expose some unpleasant things. It possibly could. Possibly be like, yeah, okay. So instead of yelling at him or her, maybe it's just, now, honey, here's a category I noticed. And this is probably something we got to give some attention to. How can we improve in this area? But honesty is really, really important. So recognize these things are going to help us develop a plan. They're going to set the limits for our budget that we're trying to come up with. And our intent is not to blame one another, but just find out where we're at so we can make some important decisions to get in a better place. So here's the thing. Next week we're going to talk about, okay, how do I actually put this budget together? We're going to talk about that. But it's going to be hard to do if we don't know exactly what the numbers are, you know. And really, the first budget that you put together should just recognize these are the real numbers. This is what we actually spend. And, okay, now that we got that written down, here's how much I make, here's God's money, here's the government's money, here's how much we actually spent in all these categories, and then I get down here to the bottom, is it a plus or a minus? You know? If it's a minus, then I got to go up here and start changing some stuff and get it to where it's a plus number. And I'm going to give you some tools next week that even have like percentage guidelines and things like that. What is a family in a normal situation, a family your size, at your income, what do they normally spend on housing? What do they normally spend on groceries? And I'm going to give you a chart that you can use that has those percentages to help you with this. Don't be afraid to make a plan. But in order to plan, you got to know what's going on right now. Where are we actually at right now? And hopefully, if you'll take the time and energy to do the tracking, get all your debts written down, then you're going to be in a position to put together a good budget that will really, really help you get where you want to go. Let me say a prayer. Father, thank you so much for allowing us to be here today. Thank you for the truth of your word. Thank you, Lord, for the simple common sense things that are available to us where we need to understand these things for our own financial well-being and to use your money in the way that it should be used. Father, just lead and guide each person and each family and help them with these things. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.